Imagine for a moment a teacher, someone trusted to guide young minds, publicly embarrassing a black student, not for misbehaving or lying, but simply for sharing his truth. 11-year-old Jamal Walker proudly revealed that his father was Sean Combs, known to the world as Diddy, but to Jamal simply as Dad. Instead of support, Jamal faced ridicule, skepticism, and mockery. His teacher, Miss Kent, dismissed his claim outright, turning his identity into something to laugh at, seemingly because his appearance didn't match what she expected. The classroom erupted in laughter while adults remained silent. But when truth arrived unexpectedly through the classroom door, the silent prejudice that had gone unchallenged was finally exposed. Join us to see how justice sometimes comes quietly. But when it speaks, everyone listens. The late summer haze hung heavily over Stonecrest, Georgia, as Jamal Walker adjusted his backpack straps outside the duplex he shared with his mother. Their front yard, though neatly maintained, showed patches of brown from the August heat. His mother, Monique, knelt to fix his sweatshirt collar, offering few words, but a meaningful look. The kind mothers give when their children face a world they can't shield them from. "You're smart," she whispered, tightening his strap. "You're kind, and you belong." Jamal nodded, though doubt lingered. Being the new kid wasn't new to him. This was his 4th time. But this place felt different, colder somehow. Their new neighborhood wasn't openly unwelcoming, just cautious. When they first moved in, the white couple across the street paused their yard work to stare. A woman walking her dog crossed to the opposite sidewalk without acknowledgement. The message wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. The school bus arrived with a mechanical sigh. As Jamal boarded, conversations quieted, subtly but noticeably. Glances swept over him, made quick judgments, then darted away. He found a seat near the back, clutching his backpack to his chest, focusing on the blurring landscape outside. Eastfield. Middle was picture-perfect on the outside. Pristine brick walls, a well-maintained flagpole surrounded by fresh mulch, and hallways lined with inspirational posters about excellence, responsibility, and character. Yet as Jamal entered, he felt an underlying tension, the kind that exists beneath polished surfaces and forced smiles. In room 312, his homeroom, conversations didn't stop completely when he entered, but they slowed. Dozens of unfamiliar eyes briefly assessed him before returning to their discussions as if he were barely worth noticing. No one made space. Jamal slowly walked to a back seat by the window, backpack still clutched protectively, his gaze fixed outside. At the front stood Ms. Kent with her salt and pepper curls and square glasses she peered over rather than through. She scanned her attendance sheet before looking up, her expression unchanged. "Class," she announced without warmth. "We have a new student. This is Jamal Walker." He nodded. "From Atlanta," she added flatly. "Okay, just find an open seat." Jamal was already seated. She barely glanced at him again. Neither the boy beside him nor anyone else offered a greeting. As the morning progressed, Jamal noticed how Ms. Kent's tone shifted when addressing him. When Trent, freckled, blue-eyed, perpetually smirking, gave partially correct answers, she smiled and encouraged him. When Jamal raised his hand, even with correct responses, she either passed him over or acknowledged him with tight-lipped nods. Never praise, never engagement. By lunchtime, the pattern was clear. He navigated the cafeteria with his tray like someone lost in fog, searching for any available seat. Each time he approached a table, students leaned away, whispered, claimed seats were taken. He ended up in the farthest corner, carefully unwrapping his sandwich. Laughter and conversation buzzed around him. No one spoke to him. No one needed "you too." The week continued in this rhythm. Each evening, Monique asked about school. "It's fine," Jamal always replied. She never pressed further. Perhaps she already knew. Perhaps she'd experienced it herself once. But her morning words stayed with him. "You belong." Then Monday arrived. Ms. Kent stood at the whiteboard, her voice crisp and precise. "This Friday," she announced, "we'll begin Family Legacy Week. Each of you will prepare a presentation about a family member, parent, grandparent, or guardian who has shaped your life. You'll explain their profession, their importance, and lessons you've learned from them." Excited murmurs filled the room. "My dad's a dentist. My grandma's a vet. My mom's an Army nurse." Jamal's fingers tapped his desk edge as his heartbeat quickened. For the first time in days, something besides anxiety stirred within him. Clarity. He already knew exactly who he'd discuss. That night, he retrieved a worn manila folder from his closet shelf. Inside lay fragments of truth. A birthday card in bold, familiar handwriting. "Love you always, Dad. S." A backstage snapshot. A slightly grainy photo showing a man in dark sunglasses holding a small boy. The man wasn't smiling for the camera, but for the child. His mother had revealed the truth when he was 9. The man in the picture wasn't just some celebrity. He was Jamal's father. Before fame, before headlines, before the whirlwind of music and power, Sean had been simply Dad. The visits became less frequent. Calls dwindled. Fame created distance, secrets, silence. But there remained just enough connection to leave evidence, just enough love to nurture roots that still reached Jamal's heart. All week he worked on his speech, practicing after dinner. He stood before the mirror, struggling to steady his voice. "My dad's name is Sean Combs, but the world knows him as Diddy. He's my hero, not because he's famous, but because he taught me to believe in myself, even when others don't." Monique watched quietly from the hallway. She offered neither encouragement nor discouragement about sharing this truth. She said only, "Tell your truth, but be prepared if they don't believe you." On Thursday, the day before presentations, Jamal skipped recess. He remained at his desk reviewing note cards with the photographs safely stored in his binder sleeve. That's when it happened. Trent approached, flanked by 2 boys. "So," he grinned like he already knew the punchline, "who are you talking about? Tomorrow, Drake, LeBron?" Jamal looked up calmly. "Diddy," he stated simply. Momentary silence, then exaggerated laughter, the kind meant to bury someone. "Diddy?" Trent doubled over. "You serious, dude? Look at you, that's your dad?" "Nah, man, no way. Maybe your mom just tells you that to feel better." Jamal stared at his paper, fists clenched beneath his desk. He remained silent. He didn't need to respond. The truth was tucked away in his binder, yet he felt it slipping slightly, not because it wasn't real, but because the world seemed unwilling to believe it. Friday dawned with gray overcast skies pressing low over Stone Crest. Jamal stood before the bathroom mirror in early morning, quiet, adjusting his freshly ironed white shirt collar. He checked his backpack 3 times, once for the photo, once for the note cards, once more for reassurance. In the kitchen, toast and eggs scented the air, but his appetite had vanished. Overnight, Monique looked up from her coffee, studying his face. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Good. Remember, you don't need to convince anyone. Just tell your truth." Jamal said nothing, just zipped his bag and headed for the bus stop. The school bus journey felt longer than usual. Whispers traveled down the aisles, occasional glances flicking toward him with familiar smirks, like they anticipated entertainment. Someone near the front muttered, "Bad Boy Jr." Jamal didn't react. He sat quietly by the window, breathing through his chest tightness, telling himself that today, truth would speak louder than laughter. Room 312 buzzed with anticipation. Family history posters lined the walls, and a table stood ready for visual aids. Ms. Kent arranged student name cards near the whiteboard, determining presentation order. Her demeanor remained unchanged, professional, distant. If she'd heard hallway whispers, she showed no sign. Jamal sat at his usual window seat, hands flat on his knees, mentally rehearsing his speech. Presentations began. A girl showed a framed photo of her grandmother, a retired Delta flight attendant. A boy passed around a handcrafted fire truck model, describing his father's work as a DeKalb County firefighter. Each received laughter, applause, encouragement. Trent swaggered up next, displaying a laminated collage of his uncle, an assistant basketball coach at Georgia State. "He taught me how to shoot three-pointers and how to win," Trent boasted, glancing meaningfully at Jamal on those last words. The class applauded more enthusiastically than they had all morning. Miss Kent smiled as if she'd especially anticipated this presentation. Then came Jamal's turn. He rose slowly. His legs felt rigid, but his hands remained steady. He carried note cards in one hand, the plastic sleeve containing the photo and birthday card in the other. As he approached the front, the classroom atmosphere shifted. Several students leaned forward. Some smirked. Trent nudged his neighbor and whispered something that drew soft laughter. Jamal ignored this. He carefully placed his materials on the desk near Ms. Kent, cleared his throat, and faced the room of eyes, most of which didn't truly see him. "My name is Jamal Walker," he began evenly, "and the person who has most shaped my life is my father. His name is Sean Combs, but most people know him as Diddy." Laughter erupted immediately, loud, unrestrained. Starting from the middle row, it spread outward. One boy slapped his desk. A girl covered her mouth as if hearing something inappropriate. "Oh my God, he's serious," someone muttered. Jamal stood motionless, waiting. Miss Kent raised her hand, gradually quieting the noise, though smirks remained. She studied him with an unreadable expression, then sighed briefly. "Jamal, let's be careful not to treat this as a fantasy assignment. This is about real people in your life, not celebrities you see on TV." Jamal blinked. "But he is my father. I brought—" "That's enough," Ms. Kent interrupted, her tone suddenly sharp and final. "You're not here to play pretend. Please return to your seat." The room fell silent again, but heavier, more uncomfortable. Jamal looked down at the photo still lying on the desk. For a moment, his fingers hovered over it uncertainly. Then he collected it, returned it to his folder, and walked back to his seat. Nobody looked at him, not even those who had laughed hardest. He skipped lunch that day. Instead, he sat alone in the library, head bent over a blank notebook page. The photo rested face down beside him on the table. He stared at the empty page while his mind replayed the scene repeatedly. Her voice cutting him off, the laughter, the disbelief surrounding his words like smoke until everything he'd said vanished. That evening at home, Monique chopped vegetables in the kitchen when Jamal entered. Without speaking, he placed his crumpled speech and the photograph on the counter beside her. She turned to look at him, her expression unchanged. She nodded. He turned and went to his room. Later, after the house quieted and Jamal slept, Monique sat reading his notes, slowly examining every word. Her breath caught once or twice, but she didn't cry. She reached into a drawer containing bills and keepsakes and removed a phone number written on an envelope back, one unused for years. Her hand hesitated momentarily. Then she dialed. It rang twice before connecting. "Hello, Sean," she said softly. "It's Monique." A pause. "Is he okay?" "No," she replied tensely. They laughed at him today. His teacher, his classmates. He stood before them telling the truth, and they treated it like a joke, called him a liar. Another pause. "Which school?" "Eastfield Middle." "I'll be there tomorrow," he stated. "Tell him," Monique said, voice steadier now. "Tell him he did the right thing." The next morning, Jamal said little en route to school. He moved through hallways like a shadow. No one laughed anymore. Perhaps the novelty had faded, or perhaps humiliation had silenced them. Ms. Kent never mentioned presentation day, acting as if it hadn't occurred. Worksheets, lesson plans, business as usual. But Jamal sensed it, that shift, the fracture in something previously unnamed. At 9:42 a.m., a knock sounded at the door. Ms. Kent looked up, surprised. The door opened as a man entered wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He surveyed the room, his gaze steady until finding Jamal frozen at his back row desk. Jamal's mouth parted slightly, eyes widening. The man smiled, then approached the front. "I believe," he stated calmly. "There's been some confusion." The class fell silent. Even Trent stared, mouth slightly agape. Ms. Kent blinked repeatedly. "Mr. Comas, I didn't know you were—" "No," he interrupted evenly. "I imagine you didn't, because you didn't believe him. Because when a boy like Jamal says something that doesn't match your expectations, you assume he's lying." She attempted to speak but produced no sound. "You looked at my son and decided his truth couldn't be real. Not because of what he said, but because of how he looks." The room remained motionless. Miss Kent's face paled. Her hands gripped her desk edge. Sean turned toward Jamal. "You told the truth. You showed courage, and I am proud of you." He faced the class again. "This young man is my son, not because he resembles me, not because I'm famous, but because he is mine. And truth doesn't require your permission to exist." Jamal rose slowly and joined his father at the front. This time he didn't tremble. "I didn't claim he was my dad for attention," he stated calmly yet firmly. "I said it because it's true, but none of you believed me. Because of my appearance. Because people like me aren't supposed to have someone like him." He turned to Ms. Kent. "My skin doesn't make my story less real." The bell rang, but nobody moved. The sound lingered in the air as everyone remained seated. Even the usual backpack rustling and chair scraping were absent, replaced by something weightier than silence. A collective realization that something significant had transpired. Ms. Kent remained behind her desk, immobile, lips parted but speechless, her gaze shifting between Jamal and the man beside him. Diddy in person, undeniably authentic and present, had just dismantled a prejudice so deeply ingrained and casual that those harboring it had never noticed. And Jamal, composed with clear eyes, stood alongside him, not as a celebrity's child, but as a young boy who had spoken truth and refused shame. Later that afternoon, the school atmosphere had noticeably shifted. Whispers still followed Jamal through hallways, but without mockery. Faces turned toward him, not with ridicule, but something closer to recognition. Students who had snickered days earlier now watched him quietly as he passed. Even Trent, typically the loudest, remained silent. His friends didn't laugh. His swagger diminished. In the front office, Ms. Kent sat with the principal, Jamal's mother, and the school counselor. The meeting was called immediately after classroom reports reached administration. The principal, a 60-something man with kind eyes and a worn sports coat, attempted to frame the events as a misunderstanding, a judgment lapse. But Monique wouldn't accept this. "My son was publicly humiliated," she stated, voice calm but direct, "by his teacher. Not for disruption, not for dishonesty, but for telling a truth she couldn't accept. That's not a judgment lapse. That's a duty failure." Ms. Kent appeared diminished now compared to her classroom presence. Her confidence had fractured, revealing uncertainty and shame beneath. She finally spoke softly. I made assumptions. I shouldn't have. I was wrong. I see that now." She turned to Monique. "I'm sorry, truly. And I owe Jamal more than that. He deserved to be believed." The principal nodded. "We'd like Miss Kent to address students directly at Monday's assembly." Monique held his gaze. "Good, because everyone witnessed it, and they need to see what accountability looks like, too." That weekend felt different. Jamal didn't isolate himself or retreat into silence. Saturday morning, he helped Monique prepare breakfast. They danced around the kitchen to 90s R&B, her laughter brightening their small space like sunlight. That afternoon, Sean collected him for an outing to Piedmont Park in downtown Atlanta. They kicked a soccer ball across the grass, enjoyed food truck meals, and sat watching the city's rhythmic movement around them. For the first time in years, they conversed without time constraints. Jamal asked questions he'd saved for years. About music, about life, about why things sometimes became so complicated. "Why did you never acknowledge me publicly?" he asked quietly, watching nearby children fly a kite. Sean exhaled thoughtfully. "Because I believed I was protecting you," he explained. "I didn't want your name caught in my world, the cameras, rumors, constant scrutiny. But perhaps I wasn't just protecting you. Maybe I was protecting myself, too." Jamal nodded slowly. "I don't need everyone to know," he said. "I just needed someone to believe me." Sean placed his hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Well, I do, and that won't change." By Monday, the story had spread throughout the district. Some students had posted online about Sean Combs visiting their class. Photos circulated. The school fielded calls from parents, media, and community activists. But that morning, the auditorium filled as usual. Students in rows, teachers along walls, an atmosphere of curiosity and caution pervading the space. When Ms. Kent approached the stage, she appeared transformed, not just in appearance but in bearing. Her customary precision had softened. She reached the microphone and paused momentarily, composing herself. "Last Friday," she began, her voice reaching every corner, "I made a mistake, a serious mistake. I dismissed a student's truth, not because of his words, but because of my own assumptions. I allowed unspoken bias to overwhelm reason. In doing so, I hurt someone who trusted me." She looked directly at Jamal, seated beside Monique in the front. "Bro, Jamal, I apologize. You displayed greater courage than I did. You deserved respectful treatment. I hope you can forgive me." A heavy, authentic silence followed. Then gradually students began applauding, softly at first, then growing louder, fuller. Jamal felt warmth in his face, not from embarrassment, but from the strange, overwhelming sensation of finally being truly seen. Not as a problem or punchline, but as a person whose truth mattered. In subsequent days, change didn't happen instantly, but it developed. The whispers changed tone. Trent's sneering stopped. Students who once laughed now nodded when passing Jamal in hallways. Some even greeted him. He wasn't suddenly popular, but he was no longer invisible. More importantly, he no longer felt diminished. Ms. Kent, to her credit, didn't pretend nothing had happened. Later that week, she approached Jamal and asked if he would help develop a classroom project about identity and truth, something allowing every student to share their family's story in whatever form it took. Jamal agreed, not seeking redemption, but understanding that meaningful change happens only when someone stands up and speaks first. A month later, Eastfield held its annual community night. Families, teachers, and students gathered in the gymnasium for food, music, and student showcases. Jamal stood with his mother at their table, displaying his project about legacy and voice, featuring the same photo and birthday card he once feared showing. Sean arrived later, quietly without security or fanfare. He greeted teachers, posed for student photos, and stood beside Jamal, not as a celebrity, but simply as his father. Before departing, he gently placed his hand on Jamal's back and leaned close. "You didn't just speak your truth," he said. "You created space for others to speak theirs. That's more significant than you realize." That night, lying in bed watching shadows play across his ceiling, Jamal reflected on the past month, not as snapshots of pain but as images of growth. He recalled his first bus ride, the classroom laughter, the sting of being called deceitful. But he also remembered the moment the door opened and his father entered. He thought about Monique at the kitchen table reading his speech, about Ms. Kent on stage acknowledging her mistake, and about his own voice, how it once trembled but now stood firm. He whispered into the darkness, "I'm not just his son. I'm Jamal Walker, and that's enough." And it was, because sometimes a child's bravest act is simply telling the truth and waiting for the world to catch up.